Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TMPT Empire Patreon, patreon.com/TMPT Empire. We have a very special show and a very special guest, as all of our Patreon members here will be joining Dr. Tom, the former WWF World Tag Team Champion, 8-time Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team Champion, and one of the greatest trainers ever in their history of the business. Dr. Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing great today, man. Good to be on with everybody.
Yes, good stuff. We got the Mighty Joe, we got DKO, we got Ryan, Jargo, and of course RBV. So we got a nice little crew going on here. I love it.
Very nice.
Just to start things off, Dr. Tom, I'll start it off, and then before we kind of kick it off to everybody else. Interesting thing I was just thinking of is, and I saw people talking about it online because of the stuff with Apollo Crews, but have you ever experienced, or do you think Vince McMahon is racist?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't think he's racist. That's the simple answer. I don't know why. You know what? I have found that a lot of people in power get accused of a lot of things, and it's so easy, especially these days, to say because you have your standards or have your way of thinking that you're something you're actually not. So no, I don't think he's racist at all, quite honestly.
The Mighty Joe, please give us the name, where you're from, and what you want to plug.
Yeah, for sure. I am Mighty Joe. Right now, I'm sitting in my room here in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. And I'm one half of Turnbuckle Talk, which can be found with our friends, actually, with Rick and Jargo over at the HTM Podcast Network. We're coming up to our 209th episode of that podcast. So it's we've been going for quite a long time, my friend.
Nice. Very impressive. I like it. 209. That's kind of a
209 episodes coming up this week.
Very cool. Yep. What do you got for Dr. Tom? Give us a good question.
I guess my first question, I mean, it's right at the top of my list if I was ever going to talk to you, Tom, that I know that you weren't a big fan of being one of the body donnas with Skip and Zip there, but Chris Candido, I want you to tell me a little bit, maybe your best memory, your best thoughts of Mr. Chris Candido.
His brother just came out with a great book, and I'm almost done with him in the last few pages. It's a hell of a book, by the way, but I loved Chris. I knew Chris when he came to Smoky Mountain in Knoxville, and I knew Tammy when she came too. But you're right, just the gimmick wasn't him. It wasn't me. And
No.
But I got to tell you, man, Chris loved the business. He was one of those guys, and if you really love the business growing up, and all this is all you want to do, you can understand that. And just having that passion for it, having the passion to dedicate 24 hours a day of your life to it, just every waking hour was what Chris lived for, was wrestling. And he was one of the greatest people I've ever been around. It just spoiled it having rotten fruit right next to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, he was great. And I have nothing but great things to say about him. He was always, he was a pleasure to be around. And that's what I find missing today, quite honestly, Joe, is that while guys tell me how much they love it, you can say things, I don't trust words. Words, people can tell you anything, but your actions tell you everything. And yeah, a lot of people say it, but they never really follow through. With Chris, there was no doubt. And I'm reading a lot of stuff in this book here that just confirms, even when I wasn't around him, he loved the business. And that was true in everything he did.
Yeah, even from the matches and everything that I've seen about him, you could tell that it was somebody that, he definitely lived and breathed professional. You could tell somebody who just kind of does it because, they've been maybe, forced into it or maybe just happen to, do it because of family. But you could tell Chris loved professional wrestling, and it always came through on the screen. I remember when watching him, you could always feel that, dude, this is somebody who's passionate about what he does.
Well, his grandfather was Chuck Richards, Popeye Richards, and wrestling in New York. And Chris had been wrestling and setting up rings with his brother and Bam Bam Bigelow as a young guy in Jersey, and doing this for a long, long time. And, it was one of those things that as you get on and get older in the business, it can become more or less a job. And for Chris, he never got to that stage. I mean, he died, I think, at 30, 33. Yeah, he was very young. But you can get jaded after a while, and I could see that in a lot of people. And when I first started, I had a partner by the name of Al Madrill. He was 10 years older than me, and he was jaded and a miserable guy, miserable to be around, and oh my God, hated life. I couldn't understand that. And then I got to be 30 years old, and I finally understood it because I saw it from a different perspective. But being around Chris and being around guys like Chris would make me enthusiastic as well, because he would always have it. This is supposed to be fun, man. And if you're not having any fun, it sucks, man. Everything you do sucks, and it's harder, and it's just not worth going out to. So with Chris, it was a lot of fun. It really was.
Awesome.
DKO from Ireland. You're up next, buddy.
Hey, Tom. Nice to meet you. I just wanted to ask, I believe you worked with The Rock, if I'm correct? Training.
I did. Yes.
And was it obvious, Tom, from the very beginning, just how special a talent he was?
Well, you know what? I get asked that all the time, but I've seen guys like Rock come in all the time too. They have the potential, they have the size, and he was a lot of fun to be around too. But I don't think anybody, including himself, would have told you that he was going to be this huge megastar. You knew he had talent. You knew he had the size. He had all the tools, everything needed to be a top star. But we've seen that with a lot of guys, and some pan out and some don't. But this guy, Rock, had everything that Vince loved, everything that the wrestling fans would love. He was witty in practice. He was fun and a good guy to be around. But I don't think anybody could have told you he was going to be known all over the world. And that was good to see, because he was a really good guy, and he did put the effort and he did put the work in. When he talks about coming back from Canada with just $7 in his pocket, now that's true. And he struggled in Stanford, and he struggled going up against the guys who were running the roost and running backstage. But he kept going because he believed in himself, and you could see he had confidence. But could I see him being this mega star? No. We could definitely see him being a star, because he was 6'6", 6'5", whatever he was. He was big, and he put the effort in, man. So you knew he had that work ethic, and you knew there was nothing that was going to stop him from at least being a star in the business. And same thing with Austin. You knew Austin was going to be a star. He just didn't. I don't think anybody, including Steve, could have seen it at that time. But Rock had something. Everybody knew that. We just weren't aware of how much something he had until it just came out organically.
Derek, of course, is from Dublin, Ireland, if you couldn't tell by the accent there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so is Sheamus. So I had Sheamus for a while too, and so one of the things Sheamus always said is, I don't understand why you guys put over Irish Spring over here, because there's nothing about that like in Ireland. I just think it rains all the time over there, doesn't it? Anyway, yeah.
Mostly, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Anyway.
Now, Tom Prichard never wrestled The Rock, but Dr. X did, right?
Well, that's true. But now I actually did have a practice match with The Rock that was on some of the I don't remember what it was on. It was just on a Twitter or a Facebook thing that somebody put out. We had the match in the studio that we were showing him getting ready for the Survivor Series. But as far as in front of people in an actual building, no. But we certainly wrestled quite a few times at the studio in Stanford. So if that counts, that counts.
I remember Dr. X loses to him on Superstars in late '96.
Man, I got to tell you, that was at the probably the worst time of my life. But I had fun doing that too.
Why the worst?
When you get to the end of your career and everything starts hurting from your neck and your knees and your joints, and the bumps become harder. The bumps become you feel the bumps more. Let me say it like that. And in order to do it the right way, you have to do it the right way. You got to go out and take bumps. You got to go out there and get the other guy over, and that in turn will get you over. And it just, I think at that time 36 years old, and my neck. I remember the first time I started having neck problems. I got kicked in the face by Jackie Fulton in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and he just came out of nowhere and just like slammed me right in the face. And that was the beginning of my neck problems, man. I was taking the rest of the time I was taking good bumps, but by the time I got to be 36, I felt every bump. And so that was why I couldn't go out there and do what I used to do. And that's for anybody who loved the business and went out there and was trying to do it, man, and you feel yourself falling back, and you don't want to go out there and embarrass yourself, and you don't want to embarrass the guy you're working with. So that's why it was kind of I knew the beginning of the end was coming for the ring. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, where are you from? What's going on?
Well, I am from the mighty, mighty area known as Southern Illinois, but I work for Sportskeeda.com. And first of all, let me just say, Dr. Tom, it's absolutely an honor and a privilege to get to speak with you. And I got to tell you, the first time I ever saw you, maybe I'm giving away my age here, but I saw you when you were down in the Alabama territory, and you had a great feud with the Dirty White Boy, Tony Anthony. And it got kind of hot. I mean, there was pretty controversial stuff that was going on there. Do you think so? And if you could explain kind of the angle that you guys shot down there, and do you think anything like that would be able to happen today?
Well, first of all, no, I don't think anything like that could happen today, just because of the cancel culture and the question you asked me earlier, which I'm not quite sure where that was coming from. Is Vince racist? Well, we weren't racist either, but that was a time when Eddie Gilbert actually came in to start booking Alabama. Ron Fuller had sold that part of the territory to a guy named David Woods in Montgomery, Alabama, who owned a television station. And Eddie came in, and I had known Eddie for a few years, as did Tony and most of the guys there. And we were able to pitch ideas. And not that we weren't able to do it with Ron and Robert, but Eddie was looking for something new, and Eddie was a little edgier, and he had ideas that, right, wrong, or indifferent, there were better houses in the beginning, especially in Montgomery and especially in some of those other places, with Eddie and Paul Lee coming in and booking that at that time. So the angle was Dirty White Boy was going to beat me for the Alabama championship. And I suggested, let's use the Dirty White Girl and put the ether over my face, and you're going to screw me there. I'll come back the next week and interfere in a match and hit you over the head with a board, cut your hair. But she said, yeah, I need a haircut anyway, so let's go for it. And then after that, we wanted to do a deal. I had seen this angle many, many years ago as a kid. I remember the early 60s, growing up watching black and white TV, Nick Bockwinkel versus, or it was a guy named the Hangman versus this job guy on TV in El Paso. And the guy always had a noose in the corner. He would tie it to the turnbuckle. So the Hangman wins his match and goes to put the noose over this guy's neck. Bockwinkel comes in the ring and starts a comeback, and then of course, the Hangman cut him off and put the noose over Bockwinkel's neck and bealed him from corner to corner. And it just looked vicious, looked brutal. I'll never forgot that. So I said, what if we did an angle where Tony hung me out in the ring? And Eddie says, well, I need more than that. You know, let's think of something else to go with that. We have our main course. So what are we going to put around it? And we came up with an idea that after I hit Tony and cut his hair, and Kim couldn't get in the ring and save him, so she came on the next week with a black eye. Oh, my God. Domestic violence in Alabama? Are you kidding? That's every day. But, and she came out, and it was so obvious looking back on it, man. But Gordon Soley sold it, and the other guy, Charlie Platt, they're up there and they're putting it over. And she came through, started the first of the show, all the way through the show until finally I come out and she's trying to tell me what happened, and I'm the sucker baby face. I turn my back, and of course, here comes the white boy with a chair. And here's the thing: a lot of people don't know. You didn't see on the angle at the end of it, especially earlier that day. Randy Colley passed away, I think, just a couple of years ago, or maybe last year. He was one of the Moondogs, but he took a syringe and drew blood from my arm, and we put it into a condom and kept it in warm water in the dressing room. And I was going to we also had to have my hands tied behind my back, or handcuffed behind my back, because Eddie says, "No, just hanging doesn't work. We got to have a little more violence to it." So we had Kim come out that she had been beat up by the white boy. We were going to have this condom that Randy assured me would work. Kept it in the water. Right as I go out, the referee, if you notice, when Tony hits me with the chair, I go down, my glasses come off. The referee comes to check on me. He puts the condom in my mouth. Now, has anybody here had a condom in their mouth? Okay.
Fortunately, no.
Yeah, I was going to say just me. Sorry. Yeah. But anyway, so, man, it wasn't tied real tight either. Didn't even think of it. Didn't even wasn't. I mean, it's just a tip, but it's not tied. And now it's in my mouth, and now I'm feeling it's like gum. I know this is gross, but I'm trying to bite it as he's got my. We destroy the set. He throws me into the set, and the ref puts the gimmick in my mouth, and oh my gosh, now my hands are behind my back, and I'm realizing this is too chewy. It's not going to bust. Steve Armstrong had a blade just in case that didn't happen. When they come to save me, he's supposed to pop it, and the blood will go on this yellow shirt. That's why I'm wearing that yellow shirt, so you can see the blood. And anyway, we that back then we didn't rehearse things, by the way, so we weren't really sure. We knew how far the ring was from the set, but when you're being drugged and hung, and your hands are behind your head, your back, and you really haven't gone over it. We've talked about it, but we never really rehearsed. We didn't rehearse back then. All of a sudden, he's dragging me, and I realize this is taking a little bit longer than I thought. And if anybody here ever had a noose around their neck? Okay, right.
Nope.
You don't realize it tightens up as you're pulling. I mean, it was an actual noose, and this thing is really tightening up, and it's really choking. And if you watch the tape, you'll see we go right by a cop. And he's looking like, well, hell, can't do anything about this. I'm thinking, I thought it was illegal in Alabama to hang people or try and commit murder. I'm not sure. Maybe at that time the laws were different. I don't know. But that kind of took away from after I watched it back. At the same time, he's pulling me up, trying to protect me and everything. But I'm realizing these guys are going to come as soon as Eddie sends them, but he's going to wait till it's right. And Eddie had a tendency to get right to the edge, hopefully to get people as pissed off as he could. And he did. They came, and I put the condom out my tooth, and Steve took the blade and hit it, and it came out, but it stunk. People were getting sick. They just go, you can see Steve Armstrong drop his head and go, "Oh God, man." So that's the way that went. And unfortunately, it wasn't that big of a draw. Alabama at that time was on the decline, and we knew it. The business was changing, but that's one of the angles that I liked it, because I came from Texas. I came from watching angles like that with the Funks, the Infernos, J.C. Dykes, the Von Brauners, and Gentleman Saul Weingroff, stuff like, talking about things you can't do these days. Think about this, 20 years after World War II, 20 years, when you're a kid, you think that's a long time. Then you realize 20 years really ain't that long. But 20 years after World War II, you had two big bald Germans with the Iron Cross on their boots, and sometimes they had the swastika, with a Jewish manager at ringside. The heat, I didn't understand it as a kid. Then as I got older, I went, whoa, that's pretty stiff. That got those guys a lot of heat and a lot of trouble in some of the TV stations and studios they went to. So, yeah, you can't do that nowadays either. Doing the hanging angle, no. The violence, and my God, you can't even bite anybody with a cobra anymore. I mean, that was that. But you know, just real quick, and I don't mean to go on a tangent, Ryan, but when you said that, it's like, dude, that's what's missing today. That's what really got me into wrestling, because you weren't sure what was real and what wasn't. At least as a kid, when growing up, I was seeing stuff, and it was obvious these guys were actually hitting each other for real, in the eyes or in the face, and hey, man, hit me in the mouth, and let's see if we can knock out a tooth. You know, how insane is that? And you can't do that these days. Different business, different culture, different way of life, different way of looking at things. I understand that. But that was really what drew me into this insanity, because you didn't know. And that fascinated me. These guys would go on TV and get away with this stuff and get to do it every night, travel, go to a different town, different building, different ring, different atmosphere, different vibe. I mean, Christ almighty, man, it's like rock and roll. And you can't have a Jim Morrison or a Jimi Hendrix or any of those kind of crazy, insane people anymore, because we're supposed to be more civilized in a civilized world. But that was where you went to see the uncivilized stuff in the ring, man. And that was the unpredictability of it all was so cool. And that just drew it to me. I was never about the cartoon stuff. I love the gimmick stuff. But my guys were Terry Funk, the Von Brauners, the Infernos, the guys with the loaded boot, the glove, the throw of the fire, you know. And yes, if Jake was around during that time, man, that was one of the most vicious angles to actually have a live, not just a snake, one of the most deadliest snakes in the world, a cobra, a king cobra, gnaw on Randy Savage's arm. How insane is that for anybody to even agree to do that, or to even come up with that? And you see the kids crying in the audiences. That was authentic. That was real. That was real emotion. That's what got people invested, in my opinion. That's what got me invested in it, because Terry Funk, all the Funks, they did stuff like that. And Johnny Valentine, Wahoo McDaniel, those guys did stuff that made you wonder and made you question, man, how can this not be real? How can this not be true? Even though they were working. And Johnny Valentine had the great quote, think, shoot, but work. And anyway, so that angle came from the stuff that I saw in Texas growing up, a lot of stuff I saw in Houston. It wasn't as vicious, but man, they sure had a lot of vicious angles back then. And God almighty, I think that's what's missing today. A lot of it's missing today.
Mr. Jargo, you are up.
Tom, it's a pleasure to speak with you, sir. I am the host of Destino, a New Japan Pro Wrestling podcast over at Media, as well as any other potential wrestling show that I'm asked to fill in on. But over the course of the last 24 hours or so, we've actually seen a former pupil of yours kind of steal a little bit of the spotlight. And I'm talking about Kurt Angle kind of teasing a potential return to AEW. And while I would love to ask you about Kurt, and I'm sure that you've got a million great Kurt stories, I more so want to focus on the social media part of things. I mean, obviously, all of the talent that you have trained over the course of the years, a lot of it is more in ring. But what would your advice be to professional wrestlers now as they're coming up in this era of social media and how to handle it?
Be very, very careful. Here's what I tell people too. Not everybody has to know everything about your life. I understand. Look, I was about to say I understand why everybody wants to have social media, but in reality, I don't. Because I don't know why it's so important to tell everyone what you had for dinner, about your family. That scares the hell out of me, man. When people put stuff up about their kids, where they're going, everything, every detail about their life on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. It's a necessary evil, obviously, these days, because we can't stop technology. I understand that. But I tell everybody, only tell them what you want them to know. You don't have to tell them everything. You can control your narrative. You can control your gimmick. You can tell them exactly what you want them to know, and it can be completely opposite of what you are and who you are. The guys, especially in the business today, want to be famous just to be famous. They don't. It's a lot of them, not every one of them, but a lot of them just want to have everybody see them on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. It's a great way to advertise, great way to get your name out, great way to get your gimmick out. But then too many times, I have to explain. Familiarity breeds contempt. If they know too much about you, they don't care. There's no mystery. There's no mirage. There's no ambiance. There's no allure. What is it that's special about you? If you tell them everything, there's nothing special. One of the guys, and you may or may not agree, John Moxley, when he came to FCW, he kept a distance. He kept some mystique to him, even with us, because we weren't always sure if he was crazy or not, which was great, because once I got to talk to him and I said, "You're crazy like a fox, man." That's exactly what they don't understand. Too many guys that I've come across, and especially in the last 3 years, want to have everybody know everything about them and how many Instagram followers they have or Twitter or all that stuff. I'm not a big fan of it, but I come from a different era. I come from a different place. I do know it's a necessary evil because that's the way you promote. That's the way you get known. I get it. There's really no more celebrities. That's what I said earlier. Everybody's a celebrity because you can have your own YouTube show. You can have your podcast. You can get on Twitter, Facebook. It just, you've got a camera. Everybody has a camera in their phone. You have a TV studio right there at your fingertips in your phone. You can produce content. You can produce a show. And if people look at it, great. But, how long can that last? If you're creative, I'm sure it'll last a while. But in this business, and in my opinion, a huge thing that's missing is mystique, credibility, and authenticity. If you're really crazy or you really have this twerk about you, people will get it. One of my favorite people of all time who has turned into a parody of himself is David Lee Roth. Oh my God. Couldn't sing to save his ass, but he wasn't there to sing. He was there to perform. He was a performer. He knew how to talk in sound bites. He knew how to get you to have his stuff in front. He knew what to do. Was he a singer? Well, no, but that didn't matter because he would say stuff. And then later on, these days, if you watch any Dave stuff from Vegas or wherever, oh my God, it's embarrassing. But at the same time, he made his fortune already. He did that in those days. And that's what a lot of guys don't understand. It's a work. You got to think, shoot, but work. And what do they want to hear? Once again, back in that era, in the MTV early days, they wanted that kind of guy who's the rapid fire bullshit back and forth. And there's nobody out there today to do it. You don't have any Jake Roberts. You don't have any Hulk Hogans. You don't have any Steve Austins. You don't. You have Roman Reigns, who I think is tremendous. I think Drew McIntyre is tremendous as well. But a lot of what's missing are the guys who people wonder about. He'll say the words, he'll say the phrases, but what does he mean? And why do I have to go see this guy? Because this guy will entertain you. This guy will keep your imagination and your attention in full gear the whole time. And so anyway, when you tell everybody what you had for lunch, when you tell everybody what you're doing 24/7, eventually they're not going to care. That's my opinion. So I tell guys, be careful about the social media. I tell guys, you control it, and you tell them what you want them to know. You don't have to be the truth. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Please. It's showbiz. That's what I think.
RBV. Rick, you're up.
Good. Pause. I didn't know if you were still with us. You
Yes.
froze on your end, so just giving you a heads up there.
Yep.
But Dr. Tom, Rick Vickery, it's funny you mentioned John Moxley there. I'm just down the street from where he grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, so I'm very familiar. I was actually at the HWA Arena for his first match.
Yeah, very cool.
I got to see all the great names that came up under Les Thatcher.
Yeah.
It's also, speaking of Les Thatcher there, you had an opportunity to work with him in Smoky Mountain, which was one of the truly last great territories. I wanted to ask you about, the philosophies down there. The motto was professional wrestling, the way it used to be, the way you like it. Now, as we regularly talk about today, the new style, the dive, the floor routine, it seems like for each generation, and as you see the game change, there's a little bit of maybe a friction, resentment, if you will. What were your guys' feelings in Smoky Mountain Wrestling at that time when you said it was reality violence, but then you see an ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, come along that really they took it to the extreme, pun intended, where it kind of pushed those boundaries of the reality that you presented. How did you feel about it? How did your locker room, the company as a whole, feel about ECW?
Well, just to touch on the resentment part, like of every generation coming up, like I said earlier, I had a partner, Al Madrill, who resented young guys coming into the business because he knew that would be his day was coming, to end eventually. But I don't think that there was a lot of resentment at that time because there was still guys out there who were old school, so to speak. And that's where they either went, was ECW or Smoky Mountain. Because if you didn't, you look at the old school guys who came from Mid-South, like Ted DiBiase, Jake Roberts, an old school guy. Randy Savage came from, Kentucky. He couldn't get booked. As talented as Randy was, he couldn't get booked because he was a wild card. He was this guy who would go out on his own, and people couldn't trust him. So I think, I can only speak for myself, I knew times were changing. I understand times are still changing. I understand every generation has their style. Every generation has their way of thinking and their favorite thing about professional wrestling, whatever that is. And my mentor and the guy that I grew up with and was working in his wrestling office during the summers in high school was Paul Bosch. And there's a great piece on out on YouTube called Friday Night in the Coliseum. It's like a 40-minute little short film. And Paul is in his office talking about, hey, look, people talk about the changes in wrestling, and it's not like it was when I was a boy. And he says, well, nothing's like it is when I was a boy either. Things change. We have to evolve. We've got to progress. No doubt in my mind. I'd have nothing negative to say about the new generation, especially innovating and doing things. But the basics and fundamentals never go out of style. Baseball, it's still trying to hit the ball over the fence, home runs. Major League Baseball owns the company that makes the balls now. Gee, how convenient is that? It's still fielding the ball. It's still trying to, football is blocking and tackling. You're still trying to score. You're trying to win the game. There's the basic foundation for what you're doing. Same thing in professional wrestling. It's sports entertainment. It's always been sports entertainment. If we hate the word, that's cool. But the reality is, it's been a work since I've watched it and since we've all watched it. It has been what it's been. There were just guys back in the day, and I've watched some matches from the 1930s, man. They've got Primo Carnera against Jim Lundis on there. And that it stunk. They were terrible. And I've seen matches from the 70s and 80s and yes, the 90s and yes, the 2000s that were horrible, stunk on ice. Not every match is going to be great. But then you had those guys who would go in the ring and do something unpredictable and make it unpredictable, and you weren't sure, and that gave you that feeling, that emotional attachment. So I understood that there was going to be change. I understood that when you like the flip, flop, and fly, or you like the super kick party, or you like whatever you like, cool, that's great. But I guess the way I look at it is this. When I say the basics and fundamentals never go out of style, that means you put those things in the right place. You put the super kicks where they belong. You put the flip stuff where it belongs. Jimmy Snuka was an innovator. When he first came to Texas, he was the first guy we saw who dove off the top rope the way he did. Mil Moscaris, another guy. It's going to evolve. You had your flip, flop, and fly guys back then. You did. The difference was they tried to make it more logical because they were protecting the business in such a way. And even the guys, it's hard to say they were actually protecting the business with some of the stuff they did because it was hokey. A lot of the stuff back then was hokey. I'm not saying it was all great, but even the guys that did the flips, even the guy Chavo Guerrero who did a moonsault, first guy I ever saw do a moonsault was Chavo. But when he got in the ring, he fought like a heavyweight. He fought like he was believing it as well. They went, and the guys would go to the ring as though it was a contest. Was it a work? Of course. But they didn't tell everybody, hey, wink, wink, nod, nod. Again, there were exceptions. There were those matches, like the midget matches. How in the world could we have midget matches and not have the wink, wink, nod, nod gimmicks? They were all fun and games and high spots. But then you had the world champions who would come in, like the Gene Kaninsky or the Dory Funk, the Jack Briscoe, the Harley Race. And there was just an air about those guys. And they took it seriously, and they could do anything. But the one thing they didn't do was stuff that didn't fit at the time. When Harley Race slammed Andre the Giant, it was at the right time in the match. They didn't just go out and do 6 super kicks in a row. They didn't just go out and not sell everything and just go to the next move. Because when you just do moves, move, that's all it is. And this is supposed to be a feeling business. It is a feeling business. This is performance art at its finest. I mean, you got 4 sides, and you're on. That's one of the things I always say. I'll walk up to somebody and I'll kick them and I'll slap my leg and I'll say, "Don't slap your leg," to make the point, because it doesn't sound the same when you kick somebody in the stomach as it does when you kick them in the face or the head. But when you slap your leg, it does sound the same, and that's where you lose some of the credibility and some of the part about if you're watching a movie, you don't want everybody to break that fourth wall. It's the same thing with wrestling. The basics and fundamentals, and that's basic and fundamental. Don't break that fourth wall and just put the moves where they belong and put the feeling with it. That's why not everybody can do this, because, oh man, and I've heard this so many times. I've had people call me on the phone in Stanford and say, "Hey, I can do a lot of flippy stuff and I can do a lot of stunts." Okay, great. Can you put any feeling behind it? Do you know how to tell a story? That's what it is. And that never goes out of style. I will tell you this. I think that more power to AEW, more power to Impact, more power to all those guys, because it's a place to work. But what's getting away, in my opinion, is the storytelling, is a little bit of the authenticity that people are going to say. Why? Let me ask you guys this, and maybe you can tell me, Rick. As an adult, why would you watch guys that have less credibility? I mean, or come out and treat it with less credibility and don't treat it with any authenticity. Why would you want to see that? To me, the most authentic guy in the business today is Brock Lesnar. Paul Heyman still entertains me because everything he says is real. When it comes out of his mouth, he believes what he's saying, even if it's a lie. I tell the truth even when I lie. Right. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that. I appreciate the commitment. When you go to the ring, whether it's a promo or a match, I appreciate the commitment to at least tell me a story. I know it's a story. I know it's a fairy tale. But Brock Lesnar goes out there, and I'll tell you, man, I've seen him where he's thrown the live rounds, and he's hit Orton in the head, and he's cut him open. He's hit Roman Reigns in the head, cut him open. I don't know because I wasn't there. But I will go out on a limb and say this. I'm pretty 99.9% sure that Brock and whoever he was working with has an understanding. If this happens, it's going to happen. And we're cool. It's business. It is business. There's such things as hard ways, and it happens. Nobody's going to get upset. You know, the story with Jericho come back confronting Brock. Hey, was that supposed to happen? And wanting to fight Brock after he split Randy open. Fair enough. It's good because they sucked him in. But I go out with the idea that whenever you step in the ring, you protect yourself at all times. You treat it as though it is legit. You treat it as though it's authentic. You treat it as though you're going into combat. And today, a lot of guys, not everybody, but a lot of guys go in and want to do a performance. That's where I think some of the resentment comes from. And I don't know if it's resentment as much as it is disappointment on my part, because they're not even taking the time or have the courtesy to respect the business or find out who came before them, and maybe, just maybe, what's old can be new again and make it their own. But when they don't understand where some of the guys came from, or why it's important to know about a Johnny Valentine or a Tully Blanchard or an Arn Anderson or some of those guys who really laid the groundwork, the guys like Terry and Dory Funk Jr. are being forgotten. Right? It happens with every generation. I understand because, those old guys and nobody cares. But, dude, this is a fascinating business. I mean, I'll bet you every one of you guys, because just by virtue of being on this call right here, you've read books, you know the history of the NWA, the WWE, WWF, and AWA, where those organizations came from, how it evolved, how they got to that point. This was some rugged stuff. These were guys, the con men of the con men, the carnies of the carny. Look, again, is that uncouth? Is that barbaric? Hell yes. And it should be. It should be this, because this is what it came from, man. It wasn't meant to be for a lot of little guys to go out there and play. Dude, I wanted to do it just as bad as they did. I understand their passion, but when they get into it, all of a sudden it becomes, let's play wrestling. And that kind of gets me, because nobody wants to take the time to learn your footwork, your basics, your timing, your spacing, the important stuff. It's not how much you do. It's what you do, how you do what you do, the moves, the emotion, the feeling. If you just go do the moves, that's what it's going to be. So that's, in a nutshell. I don't even know if I answered your question, Rick, but
perfectly. That
okay.
and some. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, because that's. I don't think, again, it's not as much resentment as it is disappointment in my eyes, man. That's the way I feel about it.
Round two, Mighty Joe. What do you got?
To tie into actually Margo's question, what you were just talking about, Tom. Now, in your time, you've had the pleasure to train and to be instrumental in the training of a lot of, who's who in this business. Now, of who you've had the opportunity to train, like who really stood out to you as they were really able to absorb what I'm teaching them, not only at the ring, but like we were just talking about with being able to tell a story in that ring. Who did you see that you went, that's that person?
Well, let me think, because TJ Wilson grew up in the business with the Hearts, and but when he came to FCW, you could see that he was willing to learn, willing to listen. He's definitely one of the guys. Harry Smith is another guy who I think is so talented and sold short a lot of times. So again, guys like riding in the car with Steve Austin when he was stunning Steve. Man, I didn't realize it at the time, but he was soaking up every conversation we would have in the car. And I remember riding with him and Brian Lee. Brian Lee was called Primetime Brian Lee, and Steve was Stunning Steve. And I asked both of them, why do you call yourself Primetime? And Brian said, well, like Primetime Deion Sanders. And I said, no, I don't know like Primetime Deion Sanders, because that doesn't resonate with me at all when you say that. A lot of wrestling fans, it didn't. And then Stunning Steve. Steve had no answer, because I said, what is so stunning about you? He had the long, blonde, stringy hair, the Ric Flair robe, the biker shorts, and the white boots. There was nothing stunning Steve. He was definitely stone cold. But going back to John Moxley, man, he was a guy, I think, who took things not only on his own, but listened and pretty much had the ability to go in there and be authentic in everything he did. And he knew what to do in between the moves. He knew how to translate as he went along what he was doing. So those guys, I think, pretty much stand out. Natty Neidhart was another natural, but that's not really fair to say, because they came from a wrestling family. I mean, that's kind of in their blood, man.
DKO, you're up for round 2. What do you got, Derek?
Well, Tom, as you just said there, you worked with Sheamus. I'd like to ask, what was he like? Was he very respectful, very easy to learn?
Yeah, Sheamus was really a great guy. He and Drew came in at the same time. There was some other there was some guys from England, and there was Ireland and a couple other places from Europe. They all came in at the same time. And one of the kids, I can't remember his name, stayed around Florida and got into a shoot with some guy in Florida. Really, I don't know if you guys remember this years ago. Steven something, but he was with us in FCW, and then he got released. Was still around the Florida area, and he beat the hell out of this guy in the ring because the guy was being a stiff prick with him, and he wouldn't cooperate. But Sheamus was very respectful, and all those guys were respectful. Sheamus is a great guy. He came down last year. I think it was last year. It might have been the year before, and worked out with our guys, and just very, very cool. Yeah, he was a pleasure to be around, as was and as is Drew.
He was at JPWA, right? You said?
Yes. Yeah, he came. I think it was 2019 or 20. I don't think it was last year. It was right before the pandemic hit. So it's 2019, yeah.
Ryan, you're up for round 2.
Hey, Dr. Tom, you just talked earlier about guys working stiff or snug in the ring. Over the years, we've heard stories about some guys didn't want to get in, like Lawler supposedly, legendarily didn't want to work a singles match with Stan Hansen and things like that. Were there ever guys out there that you knew were reckless in the ring that you didn't want to work with?
Yeah. Chuck Donovan. I mean, you ever heard of Chuck Donovan? Who knows who Chuck Donovan? Chick is a great guy. But my God, man, I'll never forget. I got to in Los Angeles, my first territory, and Chick came in with Tom Renesto as the booker, and Chick was a really good guy, but and he belonged in this business because he was out of his mind, looked good, but he just was insane and didn't know how to relax, didn't know how to loosen up, and yeah, that could be a little trying my first year in the business. And then, but I worked with Stan, and I worked with Stan Hansen in Japan. And all I found, the difference between stiff and solid is stiff hurts, and you're hitting in unsafe places. Stan would hit you in safe places. He laid it in, but he had to lay it in. He's a big guy. He was a star in Japan. So, and I'm not a big guy at all, and far removed from being a star. And he would lay it in, and I never got hurt with Stan. Vader was always Vader was another guy who was solid. I always heard he was stiff, but to me, he was just solid, and I understood that part of it. It's a contact sport. That's why it's even more important to make sure everything you do means something and it's in a safe place. So between Stan and Vader and some of those guys that they said were bad, I never found that. And then there were other guys who just didn't know how to apply a hold loose and were bending your elbow back the wrong way, or just your head or something. It doesn't take much pressure on your elbow to break it or pull out a joint. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. That's why it's important to be trained properly by somebody who does understand that what we do is an illusion. And the great magicians know how to pull that illusion off really, really good without anybody seeing in between the holes and the cracks and all that stuff. And guys like Terry Funk, Dory, and Dickie Murdoch, and the old school guys who really knew how to do that, those are the magicians. Those are the guys that everybody should be paying attention to, watching how they did it and making it look authentic, and then being able to walk that night, walk away and leave, not go away hurt. So, yeah, there was a couple guys, but Chick Donovan comes to mind, especially one of those guys that, ouch. Please stop, Chick. Out.
I want to thank you, Dr. Tom, because I haven't heard the name Chick Donovan in years.
Yeah,
I remember him. Yeah, kind of a tall, blonde-haired guy, right?
Yes, and he is a true character, a real character, man. He when he was in L.A. Real quick, I'll tell you a story about Chick. He had a talking dog. He told you his dog would talk to him. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I never got that one either. But he'd tell him his dog would talk to him. My dog talks to me too, but he just barks. But no, this dog talked English apparently to Chick. And then and he's still the golden boy. He's in his 70s now, and he still looks great and still calls himself the golden boy. Still looking to get booked. Still wants to be a champion. Still can't work a lick. But he's a great guy. Yeah.
Jargo.
Dr. Tom, I want to thank you once again for taking an hour or so out of your day to join us today on the call. I had been sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, what's my second question going to be? I could ask this one or this one or this one. And then you had to bring up time in Japan. And of course, as the New Japan contingent over here, I have to ask, the Japanese, it's a completely different presentation, mostly because mixed martial arts entered into the Japanese style years and years and years ago. We're now starting to see it here in the United States with people like Brock Lesnar, even going back to Ken Shamrock, all the way up through Ronda Rousey. What do you see as the integration between mixed martial arts and what we know as sports entertainment? Is it going to be more Japanese strong style, or is there another evolution there that we just haven't seen yet?
I really, looking at it, I think as we all go through the phases, people are obviously they're tired of it right now because with all the shutdowns and the quarantine and things like this, why aren't the ratings through the roof? I mean, it's a captive audience. So why aren't they watching all this stuff on TV? If you give them something different, once again, if you have the guys like the Fujinamis and the Tiger Mask from the old school who could, man, and speaking of Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid, I've seen some of those matches, man. That's Flip Flop and Fly, but they had it in the right places, and that's if it's done right and done correctly, it'll be digested and accepted, I think. But you have to have those guys. I'm not really that familiar anymore with the guys going over to Japan as far as working out in the dojos and training old school way. Because the way they did it in the old school is they would teach the basics and fundamentals and drill it in them over and over, day in, day out for years before they got a chance to even get in the ring and perform. So they had a solid basic foundation of what martial arts are, combat sports are, and they approach it from a contest point of view. And I think the way it has been presented, not so much today in WWE, but I don't watch a lot of AEW, but I don't know how anybody can look at AEW and say, hey, that's all legitimate, because it's not, or WWE. But when you watch a New Japan match or All Japan match, from the years I watched, there is an element of doubt. There is an element of those guys actually going out and fighting and having a contest. So will it come back to that? I think you need to have star power. When you had Inoki, when you had Baba, when you had Fujinami, when you had Tiger Mask, Dynamite Kid, and those kind of stars, you have to think, of course it was a different culture. It was a different time. But once again, the attitude of those guys when they got in the ring, when you listened to them talk, when you saw the two combatants, there wasn't a whole lot of healing and babyface. The Gaijin were the heels usually, but when Terry Funk went over, he did goofy Terry Funk stuff, but he made it fit. It fit in the right places. Bruiser Brody was a badass. We don't have any Bruiser Brodies. We don't have any Stan Hansons these days. We had Bradshaw, try to take up the mantle, but I think you have to have a point of reference to understand where that came from, and to be able to see it and say, man, I want to do it like that. But not too many guys don't want to study that, or that doesn't appeal to them. And it's too much, it's fast food wrestling, and it's been that way for a long, long time. So and by the way, I loved when I would go to Japan. And that's the other thing. A lot of guys said, oh, it's really stiff over there. Once again, it really wasn't. It was solid. And you knew when you were going in there, you would have that kind of match. And the people were so cool because, man, we knew we're working. And I was never the biggest guy or the most muscular guy or anything like that. But when you got in the ring with those guys, they pushed you to go to a different level as well. And that's what I think it's going to take here, too. I think it's going to take a whole different attitude, a whole different point of reference. And how that'll come back, I don't know, because we study a lot of old school stuff. And I'm not doing it just to say that's the way it ought to be today. I said, no. Take this and update it today. Watch their timing. Watch how even when they're not moving, they're moving. When they're not resting, but they're resting, but they have something moving, even if it's just a simple pat on your arm. It's that illustration that a lot of people don't get. I know they teach that at the PC. Some of the coaches do. And they do stress that, but when it gets convoluted and you get on TV, then it kind of loses the effect, because nobody is really running that tight of a ship, I think. So,
RBV, you're back up.
Well, Dr. Tom, you got a Japanese specific question from our Japanese fan here, or our go-to. Well, I'm our foodie, so I know you've traveled a lot of towns, you've rode a lot of roads. What's your order at Waffle House, or some of your other favorite food destinations from back in the day?
Oh man, and it's funny you should say that, because Sin Bodhi came in a couple months ago, and we ate at the Waffle House. We had the $2 T-bone steak, tougher than a $2 T-bone steak, scattered and covered and smothered. We had the pecan waffle, or as we say here in the South, a pecan waffle. And man, it depended if I was drinking Jack that night, or just beer, and or cinnamon schnapps. So, or peppermint schnapps too, which is very nice. So it was a diverse menu for me back then. Sometimes we'd go straight back to the hotel if I had company.
Did you guys ever have any, let's say, skirmishes or hecklers, would-be challengers when you were out after the shows, maybe hitting the Waffle House, going back to the hotel, trying to lay low or anything like that?
Well, I've only been in 2 fights in the business, and each time it was with Manny Fernandez. And it was at the Stampede in San Antonio both times. And I'm not a tough guy. Trust me. I whooped his it. No. But it was one of those things where Manny, let me remember how this went, because the next thing we see is we're at the bar and we're doing upside down margaritas. Have you ever had the chance to do upside down margaritas where you lay on the bar and they just, okay, I haven't done that in a long time. But Manny all of a sudden grabs the guy, and I see a punch thrown here, and his friend's next to him, and I grab his friend. His friend turns around and slaps me. and I'm in shock, but it's like, what do you do? Well, I try to get my hands on him, and I slap him. Now it's like two bitches going at it. It's not like a bam, bam, boy, I got him down. No. And it was broke up real quick. So I never had anything at the Waffle House, and then the second time was also at the Stampede, and we didn't go back after that because Manny liked to get drunk, and Manny liked to punch people, or just like to get in a fight. And that never was my thing, man. I was like going into a place, whether it was a bar or restaurant, lay low and look around and see who's here. Oh, I want to talk to him. I want to talk to her. Definitely want to go over to that side. And that's just the way it was back then. Again, it was a different culture, different life, different lifestyle. And so, yeah, no, it wouldn't. Only 2 times, both times with Manny Fernandez. I was in Oregon, though. I will say this. Matt Bourne was another guy who, yes. He was another guy who you had to kind of keep watching this way, that way, in your back, because Matt, we were in a bar. His aunt ran somewhere in Oregon, and Matt was lefty. And he told the guy, he goes, I'm going to give you count to 3 to get out of my face. And Matt goes, 1, 2, and just hit him. Guy's head went up against the wall. Boom, he slid down. The cops were called, and the guy's waking up. He's shaking his head, and he tells the cops that 2 black guys beat him up. And they took him out. That was it. Those are the only fights I've really been on. I take that back. Ooh, D Ford's in Atlanta. I'm trying to remember that one too. But anyway, no, no, Waffle House was always a nice, calm place when we were there.
Mighty Joe, you got anything left for the final round?
I guess just for myself, something that I know kind of bugs probably the majority of the people on this call right now, and you had alluded to it earlier, Tom. A lot of wrestling that I watch now, like when I first started watching wrestling, I always remembered a wrestling show starting with, your current jerker match, like, just the kind of the young upstarts, and we would work to kind of like our mid card and then to our main event. Now, when I turn on, say, like an AEW Dynamite, and the first match I see, everything is done in that first match. We're doing all the flips, we're doing all the pile drivers, we're doing all the stuff to the outside, and just for me, like it's so frustrating watching that because it doesn't have like a proper flow to it. And just a little bit more of your thoughts on that, of just like some of these guys like just don't seem to kind of know their place on their card anymore.
Well, I don't think they've ever seen it and they've ever felt it. I remember the first time I ever walked into the El Paso Coliseum as a kid, and I remember looking as you walked into this old building. You could smell the popcorn or smell, the smell of the fans, the roar of the popcorn type thing. Yeah. And then we walked to our cheap seats up high in the general admission, and you see this ring standing alone. And then when the matches were about to start, they played the national anthem. And then the house lights went down, and it was just the ring lights over the ring. There was a buzz and there was an excitement that I felt. These guys have never seen that. They've always seen the glitz, the glamour, the circus, the pyro. That's what they believe this is. They've never seen a real scaled down and dirty. The guys come out one side, the babyface comes out this side, the heel comes out this side. They're wearing different colored trunks. They're wearing these odd costumes. They're not letting everybody, they look like monsters. They look larger than life. These guys have never seen that. They have no point of reference. Yeah. And it's not their fault. It's no one's fault. You can't choose when you're born. And once again, I got to stress this. I know you guys understand this, but I got to say it so I know I say it. Not everything was great back then. But as a kid, but as somebody walking in for the first time, seeing this setup, and it wasn't great. It wasn't a big, beautiful building. It was the El Paso County Coliseum in El Paso, Texas. It was a shithole. It was like the first time I went to the Sportatorium. I was just training when Nick Kozak and King Parsons was going to have his first match. We went down there, heard so much about the Sportatorium, never seen it on TV, anything, but heard so much about it. You walk in there, and it was this old, rundown shithole, but the excitement, the feeling, the tension, the atmosphere that it presented, and you felt when you walked in, even as at 18 years old and walking in there going, God damn, there's something special about this place. That doesn't exist anymore. Those buildings are torn down. They don't know the feeling of anticipation. They don't know the excitement part of it. I'll never forget this. David Von Erich, my first time I was working in the Sportatorium, David Von Erich is going around in the dressing room, and he's taking his finger and getting dust off the top of the door and rubbing it on him. And he's taking dust and dirt from the floor and wiping it on him. And I said to Mark Lewin, what's David doing? He goes, oh, that's to make it look like they've been fighting in the back. Bruiser Brody and David. They had the match because they started that way. They started coming out of the door, and back then you had two doors. But they came out one door, the heel door. It was like David had got over to that side, and they fought out. So the Sportatorium fans are going, oh, my God. But he's taking that little detail. And nobody knows about those things anymore. Nobody pays attention to those things anymore because it's so much of a big scope, big stage, big, bright, bigger, better than ever. And somebody asked my brother, by the way, I'll answer any questions about Bruce if you want. But my brother came and visited the guys last year. And somebody asked, could wrestling ever go back to the way it was in these small buildings, the Sportatoriums, or the Coliseums, where it was just with the ring lights out, down over the, with the house lights out? And Bruce says no, because once you always want to get bigger and better. Production always has to get better and fine-tuned. We can't go back to black and white. It's got to get more colorful, more. But I think you're right, man. If you see all the flash and boom, boom, boom from the beginning, it kind of goes, it's like this. And I'll say this real quick. And I got this from Jim Cornette. I take credit for it, but I got to tell you, I first heard it from Jim Cornette. If you walked in to your house, like tomorrow, when you get home from work, and you see two elephants fucking outside your house, you come in and say, hey, holy shit, there's two elephants out there fucking. Holy shit. Okay, if you come in the next day, and those two elephants are still out there fucking, go, holy shit, those two elephants are still out there fucking. By the third day, they're still out there fucking. Go, there's those fucking elephants. It loses its effect. And I tell people that all the time. I'll never forget Cornette the way he said it, because it was so apropos. If you get the boom, 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 oh shit, holy shit. Second match, boom, 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 holy shit, holy shit. By the third match, like, oh, holy shit, what's the concession stand? Because it's nothing different. You're not building to it. There is no flow. But, we have come so far. And I don't know, man, when you have, I don't know even how many writers they have now at WWE or AEW or anything, but over 20 writers. But they have to have 3 hours new content on Monday, 2 hours new content on Friday. Then they have their syndicated shows in between. Not to mention the other stuff they got going on. So I don't know what the solution is. I just know that they're trying to make it bigger, better, and better. But I think maybe it all needs to be blown up and start from scratch again, to where you educate the people, because you have to educate the fans on this is what it is and this is what you're going to get. And you have to start out here again, because you keep going up here, boom, boom, boom. Eventually, if you don't have any stars, then why are you going to be watching? And nobody is really standing out these days. Brock got away from it because I think he needed to. He wanted to. He had enough too. And who are you going to get to fill that spot? I don't know. I really don't know. I agree with you though, man. It is kind of, it's a hard thing to watch. If you're watching for something other than, an explosion here, an explosion there, and oh yeah, hey, that's great. And hey, I want to be like that guy. So,
yeah. And again, too much of the, we're seeing, too much of that perception of like, I can be just like. We really have lost that larger than life persona. We're truly in awe of the wrestlers that we're watching. That's the other thing you had alluded to earlier, that that ties into all this as well.
Well, and real quick, because when you see a guy like a Sheamus or Drew McIntyre or a Randy Orton, or I'll say a Roman Reigns as well, those guys look large and those guys look different. They're not your average bears. We can see dog and cats every day, but when you go to a wrestling match or a show or a concert or whatever it is, a performance, you want to see lions, tigers, and bears. You don't want to see the average. You want to see people who aren't like us. We want to go and once again, I love David Lee Roth when he was younger. Not the parody David Lee Roth, not the Vegas David Lee Roth, but Dave, because he understood showmanship. And not everybody gets the showmanship. You wear something special when you come to the building. You don't look like the crowd. If you wear what everybody else is wearing, pretty soon you're going to be with everybody else. Stand out, and not just when you get to the arena, but wear something that makes these guys look like a star. And you don't have to be the biggest guy in the world as long as you carry yourself like a star. And a lot of these guys don't know how to do it. They have no reference.
Absolutely.
Ryan, DKO actually is having some connectivity issues, so he apologizes, Dr. Tom, all the way out there in Dublin, I guess, having some problems. But Ryan, you are up.
That sucks, man.
Hey, Dr. Tom, I feel like I'm sitting under the learning tree right now. I've just been totally enamored with everything you've had to say. But, coming up whenever several years ago, about 20 years ago, I had the chance to kind of work with Harley Race for a while. And Harley used to always use this expression that he could tell if a guy could work by the way he walked to the ring, the way he stepped to the ring, and the way he locked up. Those three things was what he always said. Was it always like that for you as a trainer? Could you pretty much right away spot if a guy had it or not?
I would say sometimes, not always, because I was wrong before, and I'll give you a big one here. I was wrong about Dolph Ziggler. I was wrong about Nick. He came, and I just didn't see it at first. And I kicked myself in the ass later on because I didn't. But then I don't know what it was. He had talent, but I just didn't see it. We were I think we had to hire 10, or we had a cutoff at 10, and he was just under it. And I didn't get it. And then I started watching him again, and he came back again for the second round of tryouts. And then you saw it. And then the more I watched him, I saw it. But I didn't see it at first. So, no, I wish I could say that. And I've been wrong about other guys, too. I thought Akam Albrecht, I thought he had it when we first started training that first week. And then, oh, my God, I went on the road with him. And he was we had to go over the match 10 times before we go out. And then right as we go out, he would have to go over it. Then he'd get in the ring and he would completely blank out. He would give me a concussion every freaking night. He would knock my head off. But and I thought he had it in the beginning, and I was so wrong about him. Mark Henry, the same thing. Mark took a long time to get it, but finally he did. And all it really is, it's like anything else. Once you're around it enough, and once you're given the right direction, and even though it may not be the right direction now, at least if someone gives you direction and you're coachable and can follow it and learn from it and figure out, okay, does it feel right to you when you're going this way? Does it feel right when you're going down this road? Does it feel right when you lock up this way? Because some people may lock up, and Brad Armstrong had a habit. It's always collar and elbow. Your right hand goes on the elbow, your left hand behind the neck. Brad would do it here, but then he'd put his hand out and just it's a different way of doing it. You have your own body language, your own way to do it. But if you can do it this way first and then go to do it your way and it works, then it works. And that's what you have to learn. But you have to be coachable first. And I think the guys who are coachable are going to get it, obviously. Mark wasn't always coachable at first, but he found his way and he found mentors, and that's what they got to do. And I think they have a lot of good mentors out there these days. I just don't know how many people are seeking them out. So, I wasn't always right on some guys, but other guys did pretty good, I think.
Jargo, you're
I guess I'll follow up on that. What's better from a trainer's perspective? Would you rather have somebody that, you know, the company brings in and says, hey, we need you to go ahead and train this guy, we're going to build him from the ground up? Or would you rather have somebody who's been on the independent scene for 5 years come into the door and you have whatever he already has in his toolbox to work with? From a trainer's perspective, which did you prefer?
Well, let me say this, because I don't think it's every trainer's perspective, obviously, but from my perspective, I would rather start from the ground up. Reason being, again, I love this because I've had every example of the good, the bad, and the ugly in the last 30 years. I really feel this is true. I just had a guy, last month, who trained with me the last session. He went to a camp. I won't tell you where the seminar was, but he went to the seminar, and I watched in the ring. I was outside talking to somebody else. They were in the ring working on something, and I watched him in the ring. And this one other guy had him in a headlock. This fellow who had gone to the seminar was in the headlock. So he backs this guy to the ropes, goes to shoot him off, pulls him back by his waist, by his waist, and grabs him in the headlock. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, stop. Where did you get that from? He goes, I learned this at seminar last week. I said, whoa. Explain how this works, man. You back him to the ropes, first of all, which I don't agree with, but you back him to the ropes and you're trying to get out of the headlock. He lets go of the headlock. You pull him by the waist and you grab a headlock. Bad indie habits. A lot of indie habits are bad because they're taught by guys who have only been on the indies, taught by guys who've been taught by themselves. Not a bad thing. I have met some really great independent wrestlers who know their shit. I met some independent wrestlers who don't know this shit, who don't understand logic, who don't understand why the hell we're not doing it this way and why you shouldn't do it that way, because in their mind, it looks cool to them and their people pop for it. Their fans pop for it. That's fine. I'd rather have somebody with nothing. I'd rather give them my bad habits because I know that my bad habits are going to be better than the other guy's bad habits. You can learn, and everybody needs to have their own way. I'm not saying it do it just one way. We don't want cookie cutter. The Rock, when he throws a punch, open hand. Hey, Dwayne, you can't throw, but you got to keep your hand closed when you do it. Oh, okay. Open hand. If you can get away with it, great. Again, they don't want you slapping the leg. They don't want you slapping your arm. But if you can get away with it, Bobby Eaton could do it with nobody could see it. If you can do that and you're that good, man, that's great. But from a trainer's viewpoint, from my viewpoint, I want to teach you this way. Not the bad habits of taking the guy back. You're in the headlock. You shoot him off. You pull him by the waist, and you go around his back and grab a headlock. That just makes no sense to me. That's bad indie habits. I'd rather have it without it.
RBV, you're up.
You're muted, Rick.
Keep it clean, Rick. Keep it clean.
I was going to
There
say,
you go.
with Dr. Tom, with the pro wrestling bubble seeming to be shrinking, with ratings on decline and the mass appeal almost non-existent, in today's WWE environment, how would you grade the job being done by Brother Brucey, Vince and company?
What do you mean? They're doing a great job.
Trying to get you kicked out of the family, Tom.
Yeah. No, that's fair. No, you have to have talent, first of all. And this is unprecedented. I mean, I know that's an overused word right now. This has never happened. I mean, with the pandemic, not being able to run house shows, doing what they can do, they're doing the best they can with what they got. Nothing is appealing to me right now. And I've heard it said many, many times when I was there and even when I wasn't there. Sometimes you just got to keep moving. And I think that's what they're doing. They're moving and they're doing what they can do with what they got. I don't know who Bad Bunny is, but you know what? If he's selling the merch and he's getting the eyes on him, man, whatever. It's not my cup of tea. But once again, I like David Lee Roth. So, but as far as doing the job they're doing, what else could they be doing? It's the climate we're in. Wrestling just isn't hot. There's only so much you can go up, and eventually you got to come down. It's not gonna sustain, man. How long was the Attitude Era hot? I mean, and then you're gonna hit it, and then you're gonna come back down. So I felt bad for Drew when he had to go out with no people win the title. The reason I do this, and I'll say this, Drew still has a long way to go, a lot of work to do, no doubt, and he knows that. And they're telling him this all the time. He still hasn't hit where he needs to hit. But here's a guy who worked his ass off. Here's a guy who went back to Ireland, went back to Scotland, pardon me, Scotland. and he went back and started from the bottom again and worked his way back up. And I would see him at some of these conventions over the years before he went back. He knew he wasn't ready. This is a mind game. There's more that what we do in the ring is really that much of what the business is about. When I say that, the guys don't get it until finally they get it. And they're faced with this confrontation. They're faced with, when we say, there's three kinds of people: those who try, those who give it their best shot, and those who do whatever it takes. What do you mean when you say whatever it takes? Well, let's see. What does it mean when they say it's lonely at the top? It's because everybody's fighting to be there. I've never been a top guy, but I've been in the room when top guys are discussed. I've been in the room when decisions have been made. It's a brutal business. It's the entertainment business. When you're running the show, you have to decide who gets the push. Well, how do you decide that? Who is coming to you saying, hey, I know I can do this. I know you put me in that spot. I'm going to prove that I'll get the ratings up. I'm going to prove my merch will sell. I'm going to prove that I can make a difference. Then you got to get somebody to work with you, like a John Cena or like a Hulk Hogan or like a guy like Savage, going back to those days. You got to have it. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of games that you got to learn how to play. It's exhausting. It can really take its toll. That's why a lot of the guys you see, and they look like they've been through a war, it's because they have. It's every single day. You have to be thinking. You've got to be on your toes. And Vince doesn't sleep. Vince is a cyborg, man. He's incredible. And all those guys are on that schedule. So I think, and also it's a cop-out thing. I would say they're doing the shits, but they're doing what they can do. They're doing with what they got. And it's a TV show during a time where there are no fans, there's no crowds, and hopefully it's going to change in the next month or two. But my God, to go out there, those guys, I'll feel bad for them because they're working in front of monitors. They're doing the piped-in crowd noise. They're doing what they can do with what they got. And the guys who are in the position, like the Drews and the Romans and all those guys, my God, there's the only thing to judge them by is the TV ratings, I think, and the merchandise sales. They let their live events crew go. They let a lot of the office people go. They're making more money than ever. They let producers go. They're turning a profit for a publicly traded company. That's the aesthetics of it. The human part of it is we're going, well, the action sucks. The show sucks. There's nothing to get into, nothing to sink your teeth into. But having been up there in those offices and seeing the way those people work and being at the shows and the production meetings and the producers meetings and the pre-production meeting, the pre-producers meeting, then the meeting, then the post meetings, and then the meetings about having a meeting. Oh my God, Christ! And they're still doing that even with no people in the crowd. So I mean, it's a tough gig. And
do you feel like they've overcomplicated the process at this point? Is that the problem at its core?
I don't know if that's necessarily the problem at its core, but I certainly think it's overdone. It's overproduced. It's over, instead of going out and letting but I think they're doing that because they don't trust the guys to go out and do what the guys were able to do so many years ago. I think it's hugely overproduced, largely overproduced, overdone, way too much. 20 writers plus, God almighty, damn, how does that work? I don't know. but I've seen it where everybody's sitting on their laptops.
I mean, I can't imagine somebody writing a script and handing it to Terry Funk and saying, okay, we need you to go stand out in the middle of the ring and talk for 15 minutes and say this word for word.
But there are no Terry Funks. There are no guys who have that
There is
authenticity. There are no guys who have that life experience to draw from. Mark Lewin is one of the most interesting people out there. And I knew him as a kid growing up, going to the gym, going to his apartment and learning how Mark worked and how that mind worked. And Terry Funk the same way. Those guys came from a different place.
Right.
Nowadays, everybody has to have it produced for them, or they don't trust them to do it themselves. They just don't have any life experiences or any point of reference. They didn't grow up with the Terry Funks. They grew up watching the Hulk Hogans or the Ultimate Warriors or who in the hell. I don't know. The guys who grew up watching Brock Lesnar were scared of him, no doubt about it. But who's as big and bad as Brock Lesnar? There's only one. And Brock enjoyed professional wrestling. He's that legitimate guy. There's only one Paul Heyman. There's only one Jim Cornette. And those guys don't exist anymore because they are authentic. What you hear with Jim Cornette is what you get with Jim Cornette, even off camera. That's Jim. Same thing with Heyman. That's Heyman. That, when he's being smooth and trying to be so cool and lie to your face, that's Paul. But everybody knows that, and that's why he's there. That's why they don't write scripts for him. He does his own thing, and it's so natural and so authentic. It is overproduced. I really do think. I don't know if that's the only problem they have, but it's certainly one that they have, and I don't know if it's going away anytime soon, man. I really don't.
One final question. How is the relationship with Brother Brucey today? And obviously, there has been, I guess, issues in the past. Is that all behind you now?
Well, look, I've known him my whole life. and he is that guy. We're two different people, man. We've always been two different people. And I understand a lot more than I did before. I'm the older brother, by the way. And he has always been that guy, and I've always been this guy. I said that one time at a show. I said, look, I'm this and he's that. And he goes, what's that mean? So we'll look at it. I don't wear a suit. I'm not a tie guy. You have these guys and you have those guys. I understand that. And there was issues before, but I've learned that life is short, man. Do I really want to have all the animosity and bad feelings and grudges? No. I don't care anymore. I really don't. But I still understand. He's got his gig. I've got my gig, and it is what it is, and it will always be that way. Some people, it's like you could put lipstick on a pig, but I'm still a pig. I get it. I'm good with that. I've come to terms with where I am and what I've done. I'm okay with that, man. I'm good with it, and I think Bruce is good with it too.
Who was it that once? I'm sorry, Dr. Tom.
Go ahead.
Who was it that once said they would take a bullet for you and they would put a bullet in Bruce?
That was Mike Bucci. No,
yeah, Simon Dean, right? Yeah,
yeah. So we made a T-shirt on that one too. But that's because
a great line.
Yeah, Bruce. But Bruce is he's the office guy, and after being in that office, man, I had an office in talent relations for a long time, and it was on the 4th floor, and it was like not less than 50 feet away from Vince's office. Man, dude, I would come to the office wearing this, my sweatshirt, my sweatpants, until finally John and JR tried to tell me a couple times, but I just shrugged it off. He said, I need you to dress more professional. Okay, I understood that. I got it. But at the same time, I looked at it like this. I'm a coach. I'm not an office guy. I should have been. I knew how to be. But when you're in that position, you have to understand that position. And I did understand that position. I just had a difficult time executing what I needed to execute. If there was something going down, for instance, and you knew it's going down, well, what do? If you do the right thing, is it necessarily the right thing for business? Well, maybe not. But sometimes, you're the only one you got to live with, and you're the only one you have to wake up with in the morning. And That's how I felt about a lot of things, and a lot of things in developmental I felt strongly about, because I know how hard it is for those guys to wake up on a daily basis, go to the ring, bust their ass, and not be looked at or not have an opportunity. And sometimes I would say that, no, you're bringing up the wrong guy. And you got to understand, they're going to bring up who they want to bring up. They're going to do what they want to do, and they need you on board. And if you can't be on board, then you ain't going to be on board. And I understand that. I mean, that's just, people have to make decisions, and not always popular ones, and you're not always going to have everybody like you. I get it. I've been on that end of it too. But in the end, and at the end of the day, we're all going to die, and I'd rather die happy. I'm not going to die miserable. I don't want to have bad feelings and bad blood and all that shit. It doesn't matter. In the end, it really doesn't matter. It's just wrestling.
And I think that's a great ending point. I'd like to thank everybody, Mighty Mighty Joe, RBV, Ryan, Jargo, and of course Derek, who kind of fell off the map there, literally, but that's okay. Thank you everybody for joining us. This has been a blast, and
hey,
looking forward to the next.
And I want to thank you guys too, because it's kind of cool sometimes, man. And if I could just say this, John, real quick, I love wrestling. I still love wrestling. I really, really do, and I love people who have a passion for the wrestling business. I love people who have passion for wrestling. I love people who have passion, no matter what it is. And if you feel strong enough about something, man, shit, that's all that really matters. And when I have guys come to the wrestling school, even if they don't have the talent, if they have the passion, I'll take passion over perfection any day of the week. And so I think that's one of the coolest things, and I'm still able to get into it, even when it's shitty. Even when it's shitty, I'd still be rather doing this than anything else. So, and I appreciate you guys coming on too, especially on a Saturday night.